Hey Tiago, how are you, man?
Hi, Ollie. All good, thank you. And you?
Yeah, good. Thanks. Great to have you on the show. You're over in the city at the moment, is that right? In over in
Exactly
Lisbon.
in the middle of the concrete jungle. Yeah, I moved here a few years ago. Lived in Ericeria pretty much all my life. And when I met my wife, she tried to live there for a few years, and it wasn't going very well. And I was traveling so much back then that I kind of like the idea of a change, in my life. So
Yeah,
we moved to Lisbon, and it's been sort of like living away from the surf, which is not that much actually, but it's been nice because I've always loved to be in big cities and sink a little bit of culture and other things. So it's cool. Lisbon is such a coastal city. You can be in 50 minutes. You can be out there in the ocean. So
yeah,
it is only 25-30 minutes away. So it works fine.
yeah. And it's pretty good to some decent surf sports, right? I mean, like Costa Caprica is just around the corner, and
Yeah, you can
it's
get
not
decent
far away.
surf. Yeah. Listen, when I moved here, I was traveling. I was still doing the tour. It was one of my my I think my before last year, and I was just pretty much 8 months of the year away anyway. So,
Yeah,
but then when I settled in Lisbon, I still have a lot of life of my day by day life based in Ericeira. I have all my boards in Ericeira.
yeah,
Um, but it's just so easy to go against traffic, and there's lots of phone calls to do. So these 25-30 minutes you can use them actively and productively. So it's
yeah.
not bad for me.
That's it. And now that things have opened up, there's a big airport, like the Lisbon International Airport is right there, in the town.
And
So you've got like quick access to get anywhere.
plus that, when I was living in Irisara, this airport trip was a bit of sometimes it could be stressful because you're going with the traffic to the city.
Yeah.
So sometimes if I had like an early flight, it would be sort of like a problem because I had to think about traffic and all these kind of things. Nowadays, well, I'm in Lisbon. I'm literally 5 to 10 minutes away from the airport, and yeah, those type of problems don't exist in my life anymore. But I don't travel so much
Yeah.
nowadays too. So but I already had some of my life, not in Lisbon, but around Lisbon.
Hmm.
My all my physical training, it was done in between Cascais and Lisbon. I had
Okay.
two coaches, so I was driving all the time. Ericeira, Cascais, Ericeira, Lisbon to do my physical training like 4 times a week.
Yeah.
So when I moved here, I sort of like gained a little bit of more quality of life, which is kind of weird to think about because I was living with an open ocean view from my window, and now I can see my neighbor's window, and that's it. But in practical terms, I gained a lot of time that I was kind of like uh, not using properly.
Yeah.
Also, of course, I didn't mention, but the biggest decision, the biggest reason we moved to Lisbon was one, my wife and her job and her life, and two, our kids. We wanted to to give them a proper, like a good education.
Hmm.
Nothing against Ericeira. There's some nice schools in Ericeira, but we wanted them to be close to some of the best schools in the country. So that was the main reason, actually.
Nice. Cool, man. And you're still competing. You're in the Perfect Chapter event over in Cockavelish in February, and yeah, how was that? I mean, it was pumping.
Yeah, I wouldn't say I'm still competing. I pretty much signed up for that event because I love barrels, and
Yeah.
I was the first winner of that event, and sort of have this relationship with the organizer, and I helped him kind of like developing the event in the beginning. I was still on tour back then, but I it's not a secret. I thrive to barrel. I live to do barrels and to get barrels. So for so many years it was my motivation. Nowadays it's still sort of my motivation. And to have an opportunity to compete out there in a good day of surfing with a couple of guys in sort of like empty lineups around some of the best spots in the country, which
Yeah.
is which is sort of like very fickle these days. It's always a good moment. So, but I wouldn't say I'm competing. I'm totally out. I'm really out of shape now. I've had two operations, two surgeries to my right knee on the last 3 years, and it's been tough on my body because I also have my kids, and you know I want to have the time to do proper rehab, but I need to give my kids their time as well. So
Yeah.
it's been sort of like a weird kind of moment the last 3 years, and I got a little bit out of shape, which I wasn't really expecting. So I was thinking about competing in the Portuguese league for a few years, but to be honest, like I don't want to be out there with no intentions of winning it. So
Hmm.
I'd rather stay home and spend quality time with my family or do trips or whatever. So
Yeah.
I stepped out the competition mode a bit. It was a long career, a lot of hits, and nowadays I'm more into different projects.
Yeah. Well, I'd love to, if that's okay, kind of jump back into before competition started and growing up in Ericeira. And yeah, how was that? I mean, like you started surfing when you were like 8 years old or something, wasn't it?
Well, I'm from Lisbon originally. I grew up in Lisbon. I was born in Lisbon, but Ericeira has been my holiday place since I was born.
Okay.
So I spent all my summer holidays in Ericeira since I was born. So it's very funny because I wasn't an early bloomer. I had somehow sort of like a trauma with the ocean when I was young, when I was on my five, in between my 2 and my 6, 7 years old. I couldn't really get close to the ocean, and I was on the beach with my family. I just turned my back to the ocean and just play in the sand, or I did whatever I could, but I totally avoid the ocean. And for I don't know, it might have been like a trauma when I was a baby or something. Um, and then one summer, something happened that it kind of changed the whole thing upside down, and I start swimming on those rocks in San Lorenzo, the beach that I always stayed for my holidays. And there's these natural swimming pools and stuff. So I got completely in love with the ocean and with those moments. And I couldn't get out of the water. It was just like the opposite. My mom was always like calling me in. I couldn't leave the water. I got all like rashed, my body all burned from my shorts and stuff like that. So eventually I started boogie boarding on the little waves at
Hmm.
the end of the wave in San Lorenzo, in the middle of the rocks. I had my little spots there, and do little barrels and little rollers and stuff like that. So I boogie board for like maybe 4 or 5 summers, and then my older brother Ricardo is 5 years older than me, and we had this big group of friends in the summer. They were all like teenagers, and I was the
Hmm.
youngest. I was like the mascot of the group, and one day the majority of them they surfed, and the other, and like there was some of us that boogie board. So one day they just forced me. They told me, man, next tomorrow you're gonna surf either you want or not. We're gonna tie you up to our leash, and you're gonna come surfing with us to the outside. I was like scared, crazy, and I was like, no, I didn't want to leave my boogie board. I was so happy with it, um, but somehow I tried it next day, and stood up on a first wave, and just felt something so strong that the boogie board wasn't really giving me at the time, and it just completely changed my mind. I was 11 years old when I catch my first wave, stood up on my first wave. So I would say I'm a late bloomer for the kind of person I became, of athlete I became. There's not many guys on tour that started surfing when they were 11. Plus, I only surfed for a few weeks during the summer. That was it for the first few years. I was still living in Lisbon with my family, with my mom, and there was no way I could surf during the winter. On the weekends, there was no cars, there was no rides. My mom, she didn't really like to go there during the winter time. So eventually, one weekend or two, I could find a ride to go to Ericeira. But the first few years I surfed, I was already surfing. I just surfed in the summer, and then I got really hooked up because there was the beginning of this national tour for kids, and I've always been like a competitive machine in my life. I was competing in Lisbon with other sports like basketball, volleyball. I was even volleyball champion in Lisbon with my school. And then when I found out about this national tour for young surfers, I just got hooked up with surfing, and I was like, nah, I really want to compete with surfing now. So I signed up with my surfing club, Ericeria Surf Club, and they start taking me to these competitions. There was like four events a year, but that I think was around '93. I was 13 years old. That one was when I got hooked up with surfing. And then from then on,
it went
I
pretty
just
quickly
had,
from then, right?
yeah, from then on, I had to surf every weekend. My brother was kind of like going with his friends and stuff. And I kind of got, I got so crazy about it that I forced myself to go on the weekends as well. I would go alone on the bus, from Lisbon. We always had places to stay there in Ericeira and stuff. So I just needed to find a ride. Eventually, I started taking the bus, which was 2.5 hours all the way from Lisbon to Ericeira.
Wow.
I would finish school Friday afternoon and just try to get the last bus of the day, which would make me arrive there around dinner time, like 9 o'clock. But I had the whole weekend to surf, which was amazing for me as a kid. So that's I had this. That was my life. And 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 if you ask me, okay, did you think about being a World Tour surfer back then when I was a kid? No, I was so far away from that reality. I was this kid that want to compete nationally, but I had to take the bus. I didn't surf during the week. I was still playing basketball and volleyball at my high school. So eventually things start getting more and more serious because I think '94. I was 14. I was European champion in ISA Euro Surf. It was the first time we had a Portuguese European champion in surfing, and that kind of like made my image go a little bit bigger. I started getting sponsored and stuff like that. So that was sort of like this ramp that I jumped, and I started getting a little bit more exposure, and eventually more surfing time and stuff. Everything came behind, and then I met my coach when I was 16, José Seabra, which I worked until I was 30. So that was the beginning.
And because it was so new, I mean, it was kind of so taking it from that national level and then competing over in Europe, there was kind of almost like there was no path really, right? It's just almost like you guys were just we're just on this
totally
sort of mission
exploring.
on your own pretty much. And
totally exploring, totally like sort of like maniacs kind of for some people. For some eyes, we were like kind of like ETs that we were saying out loud that we wanted to go on the world tour. There was no Portuguese surfers on the world tour, not even on the WQS. There was no money to do it. The Portuguese, like the best surfers in Portugal, they were doing the European tour, which was the professional tour, which was pretty good. And then they would compete on the European events of the QS when the circus would come to town, to the continent. But there was never a Portuguese guy committing, saying he wanted to qualify and wanted to do the whole world tour the whole year. So I start I start I start saying it out loud when I was like 16, 17, and guys were like, this guy's so cocky and whatever. And I was just so driven that I wouldn't even listen. I was just like, but I think guys start realizing that I start getting results, even on the European Open events very early. And I wasn't really like an amazing surfer. Like there was guys surfing way better than me. They were my age, like Mickey Picon, Patrick Bevan, some French guys that kind of disappeared. That they were like so good, so much better than me. But I was just very structured mentally, and my surfing would come to life when I was competing, and I had one or two like money turns that kind of like always helped during heats. But mostly, I think me and Zé, my coach, we were very solid as a team, and there wasn't many relationships like that at the time, like so strong, like two guys saying it out loud that they wanted to qualify, they wanted to do the world tour. Of course, we had no money to do it. When we were just talking out loud, saying out loud, but we had no money until I was 18 and got runner up in the world's ISA. That's when sort of like my my image kind of went over all over the world, and eventually I swapped Quicksilver for Billabong with a bigger contract, and then eventually I had the chance to travel all year round with my coach and to be the first Portuguese doing the world tour. That was it was not until I was 18. Until then, I was doing European events. I was studying. I finished high school. I never drop out of school. I committed to my mom, and that was, I'm very, very respectful of my commitments. And I told my mom I wouldn't drop out of school until I finish high school, because if something went wrong with my choice of being a pro surfer, I could easily go back to university. But if you don't finish high school, if you miss a few years of high school, and then you're going and you're 20 something and surfing doesn't really happen and you have to go back to high school, it's not going to happen, So I had that compromise with my mom, and I did it. I finished high school. I was already traveling a little bit, missing school a lot, but I was able to finish. It was a big step in my life.
Yeah. And especially at the time, it's not like now, right, where from really early on, there is this career path almost set out for athletes if they're going to compete on that top level. And sort of then, like you said, would you have said like the turning point was then kind of getting help, getting funding after finishing high school, and then that kind of then just opened it up? And
when you're a surfer, everything or most of the things come with results. If you have results, people believe in you, or if you're a crazy phenom, like an amazing potential, then you're not even doing that good in results wise, but it's just so good that with releasing this content, you're blowing everybody's mind. Sort of like Eli Animan kind of kid, Nowadays, there's two ways of going up and get funding and get sponsored. Now it's the results path and the content path. But eventually everything will have to merge into results. Otherwise you can still hang on for a few years and build a career out of content, but I don't think it's going to be as big as a sports athlete. So for me, it was, I did the results. I was very successful as a junior. I was 2 times runner-up, world runner-up, which sucks. I wanted to be world champion, but it didn't really happen. But for us Europeans, and for us, and even more in Portugal, there were huge results.
Yeah.
So because I had that structured team behind me with Zé, and we really committed to become pro surfers and to do the QS and tried to qualify, I think the brands believed in us, and the results followed as well. So, but nowadays everything is so visible, so structured, which kind of sucks, and at the same time, because if a kid doesn't really, if a kid is not really able to go according to follow that path, sometimes it gets dropped, While for me, it was sort of like inventing my path, It was just people were like, okay, he's a standout, he's determined, he's fearless, so we'll stand behind him. Nowadays, there's 1,000 of fearless of kids, they're all fearless, and it's very hard for them to be compared in between them, and it's super. It became such a big sport, and with talent coming from all over the world, that it's very tough. It's head down and work your ass off, and you have to win events at the end of the day.
Yeah. And would you say, like, was there any kind of people that you were looking up to back then, and who were sort of guiding you as well as your coach, right? I mean, or were you just like, I'm going to do my own thing? And
I think we had a lot of inspiration coming from different surfers. We would extract some parts of one guy, some parts of other guys. Like, for instance, Brazilians, they weren't very respected back then on tour. They were totally the dark horses, and worse than that, they were disrespected by the whole surfing scene. But as Portuguese, and we know Brazilians better than most of the world, we knew that they were very strong in some aspects of their surfing, because you don't get to number 3 or number 4 or 5 or 44 in the world if you're not good at something, and of course, Americans, Australians, Hawaiians, they would not value that, but for us Portuguese, because we could identify ourselves a little bit, because speak the same language, whatever our history we have in common. But we were getting stuff from Brazilians, we were getting stuff from Americans, from pretty much from all over, and just trying to be unique as well at the same time. I think surfing wise, I was looking way more to, it's hard not to say that my generation, we were completely involved or embraced by the Momentum generation, those surf movies. But then soon enough, I started competing against a Benji Weatherly that I was loving him, like watching him surfing in the movies. And then I would see him surfing live, and it was so much worse, And I was like, I had him in the heat, and I was the dark horse. No one knew me, and I was kicking his ass. I was like, what's going on here? And then I would see this Brazilian guy no one knows, and it was just like super strong in the heat, just winning heats easily. I'm like, something weird here,
Mm-hmm.
So that's why we soon enough we start getting inspiration and getting knowledge from different surfers, and not sticking to one guy or two,
Yeah.
But yeah, it was totally different. There wasn't really a path to follow. We were just with our eyes with how do you say, blindfolded or whatever, and just, I think the stoke was the stoke was our gas, was our fuel. We're just so stoked to be doing what we love, and to be kind of like the first ones. So we were effortless, we worked so much to get there.
Yeah.
and it was a very rough ride.
Yeah. I mean, doing obviously like going through the qualification, right? And I guess that's why they call it the grind. And it's, not what it's cracked up to be, what it is sort of when people sort of look at it from the outside. And
No, especially when you're not a super talented surfer like myself. I was just a result of my work discipline and my will to succeed and and to be honest, I think I was progressing more because I was competing. If I wasn't out there competing, I probably wouldn't have progressed and became such a better surfer. If I would stay, more doing trips, because I wasn't doing trips with Kali Sled, I was doing trips with guys you don't even know, or just staying around home and compete around home, I wouldn't become so good. So I was evolving as a surfer, as an athlete, because I was out there competing, and living these moments. So everything was so organic, So nowadays it's definitely not like that. It's I would say the opposite. Everything is very premeditated. Everything is very judged from every year, every month. Kids are being judged, and it's it's tricky, but at the same time, contracts are bigger, prize monies are bigger, sport is bigger, it comes with it. I think comes with the growth.
Yeah. And over the years, I mean, you've had some great results. Is there any, like, now looking back on your career when you were competing and when you're on tour, is there any sort of standout moment that you're like, okay, that was kind of over the whole time, that was sort of the one moment?
Yeah.
Or have you probably got multiple, but
No, I've got a few. I think my second place at Sunset to Sunny Garcia, and then the Irons, that final with Zen Harrison as well, was my first. Was sort of like my first appearance as a World Tour surfer. I wouldn't say World Tour as CT, but to be like, okay, this guy, he can get somewhere, all of a sudden I was rookie of the Triple Crown that year, and almost won that final against Sonny Garcia the year he was world champion, which he was super informed. Out of nowhere, this Portuguese kid just storms through the event and gets the final and gets second. If I had won that event, it was my first year on the QS that year. If I had won that event, instead of becoming second, I would have qualified on my first year. Because I got second, I got like 27th in the ranking, but the win would take me up to 13th, and we were qualifying 16 guys back then. So I would qualify my first year. So it was so close. But at the same time, I say this a lot. I'm really super happy I didn't qualify that first year, because I wasn't ready to go, to be thrown at the wilderness of the CT. But instead, I re-signed a better contract. I was super confident I was qualifying next year, right next year. And actually, I started the year in Brazil with a final on the QS.
Yeah.
So I end the year with a final in Hawaii, and I start the year with a final in Brazil. I'm like, okay, this is my year. And I was 20 years old. It took me another 7 years to qualify. That's why I say it was a rough ride.
Well, it must have been a roller coaster, right, of emotions kind of going through and getting super close all those years, and then
super roller coaster. Your mind takes you somewhere, your body is doing other things. The results don't come along. You start getting doubts. Luckily, I had my sponsors backing me up all the time. That was the benefit of being the only Portuguese and one of the best Europeans as well. We weren't many Europeans, and back then Europe was booming as a surfing nation, and the industry is falling. So there was money, and they were throwing us that that coin. Luckily, I was stand out during a time that there wasn't so many guys as well. So
Yeah.
I think that was my luck factor. But yeah, even those years I didn't qualify. It took me 7 years. I was always taking 1 or 2 wins during the year, 1 or 2 big results. I was still like shining, but I was just so inconsistent in my head, in my game. Every time I would get close, I would start getting nervous, and the results in my performance weren't really happening.
Mm-hmm.
So yeah, it wasn't until we as a team realized that I needed to start working mentally and get a mental coach, a sports psychologist. That's when everything kind of turned around,
Yeah.
and success road came.
And
So
like, were they coming on the road with you as well, or is that sort of someone that you would kind of be seeing them back in Portugal? And
no, yeah, I was just seeing him back in Portugal.
okay.
Mental work is something you have to do with a lot of advanced sort of anticipation.
Mm-hmm.
It doesn't work if you're trying to change something in your head instantly,
Yeah.
or change it for next day or next week. So we would work a lot in well before. We would talk a lot and identify all my problems, all my stresses, what's going on, everything. We would go through all little details of my life on tour and out of tour at home as well, and we would find solutions for all of them. Find more than one solution sometimes. So we would anticipate problems and anticipate solutions, and yeah, that's how it works.
Yeah.
The thing is, I started working with Pedro, my psychologist, middle of 2006. The year I still won the QS in Ericeria, my second year, the second event I won that year, but I finished way below on the rankings. And then in the next year, we started from fresh from the beginning of the year,
Mm-hmm.
and I was qualified in August, and there was half of the year to compete still,
Yeah.
and I
Nice.
was already confirmed qualified by WSL. So something really clicked, and was working, and
Yeah.
it was something that it took us a long time to realize what the problem was. It was, of course, it wasn't just surfing. It was more than
Yeah.
that.
And it's getting the combination right as well, right? It's not just the whole physical aspect of performance. It's the mental
Yeah,
side. And
of course, you need to be a very good surfer. You need to be a very good competitor. But when you're on tour, all of those kids are both of these things.
yeah.
But then when when the heat starts, some of those good competitors just get distracted, and others that get really well prepared mentally just don't get distracted, and those
Yeah.
guys usually win.
Yeah. Like looking at Kelly, right? I mean, like over the years, and yeah,
Yeah,
sort of seeing.
Kelly's for me, Kelly's in some way an example, but in another way he's not an example, because he's so good at it was so good that technically it was so much ahead of everybody,
Mhm.
that I don't think mentally it would be an example, because he has his own little tricks which work which work very well, but I wouldn't say those his tricks are kind of like something you would learn by psychologists. It's sort of like
Okay.
so internal. um, he loves the mind game. Kelly
Mhm.
loves to play mind games with other athletes, to confront, and what I learned was more like just learn how to deal with your head, and not like
inside of yourself kind of thing.
Interact with others, play mind games.
Yeah.
You know, feed yourself energy from others. Kelly is this type of guy, you know. While I wasn't like that, and what I learned from my psychologist was more like, okay, yeah, close yourself in a bubble and just do your thing, and don't really interact much, and or interact whatever it's needed, but don't feed yourself from others. Don't try to lose any energy with others. So
yeah. And was this like, because there was another kind of side of your surfing as well, which was chasing these big waves back at home, and that whole sort of like pioneer era, I guess, of big wave surfing in Portugal. Was that around the same time, or were you doing that earlier?
Yeah, no, that was around the same
before
time.
Nazaré was already all like on the map, right? And this is kind of, you guys were sort of looking for these pretty serious waves. And
yeah, we were dreamers, you know. We bought like this old jet ski, myself and José Gregorio and Paulo Duairo, guys that I would travel all year long with them, competing on the Europeans. And then I was already on tour during the QS, and they were sort of like at home doing the nationals and stuff. Yeah. But when I was on my off season, they were my surf buddies. They were the guys that would charge with me. We surf together. We push ourselves into bigger and bigger waves. So we bought a ski, the three of us, and we start adventuring ourselves to some towing, which was totally new back then in Portugal. We had a lot of help and support from some French crew. Some guys like Vincent L'Artisien and Peo Lizarazu and Seb Saint-Jean. So a lot of guys, Jan Benetrix, those guys were towing in a lot, because with the way the beach breaks are in Osogor, it's so handy to get a jet ski, to get to surf bigger waves, because otherwise it's pain in the ass to surf there when it's big. So they start doing it very early, way before us. But at the same time, I think we had the better waves. So we start communicating, and we got a few sessions, myself and Jose and Paulo, but we were such amateurs, you know. We were always losing the ski, and a little bit scared, because we weren't that much of we weren't that good, very good drivers as well. So and we went to Nazaré because we knew that Nazaré was a place where we wanted to get big barrels. We didn't expect to get a world record of the biggest wave. We wanted to surf there and get big barrels, like 15, 20-foot barrels. That was our aim. So we went there a few times. We lost the ski, and it was a mess because the car couldn't get to the sand. The car wouldn't take the ski out of the sand. The sand is so thick over there. It was crazy. We were totally alone. No one watching us, just our photographers.
With the French guys over with you, or whether they were just like, oh yeah,
the French guys,
you some hints,
they came over for this historic session at Cascais, behind the marina. That day we started the day. We wanted to surf. They came over. We wanted to surf. The swell was huge. It was too big it was too big to surf in France. So they all came down. So we started the day in Cascais. We wanted to surf in Cabo Raso, that big wave spot.
By the lighthouse.
We never really watched it with that size of swell. So we started the day there. We watched the sunrise there, and it was way too big for the spot. We were like, oh my God, we couldn't even realize what was the wave. So we took the convoy up to Peniche. We went up to Consolação to try to surf Consolação, which is also a big wave spot. We sort of like rookies, huh? We were amateurs. We didn't really know the spots yet very well. So we were there, and the waves weren't that big, and it was that nice. So we kind of lost. So we knew that the Marina and Cascais, there was big waves there. So it was sort of like our last resource that day,
Yeah.
because the wind kind of came. The wind kind of came, started howling from the north, and the waves weren't very perfect anymore. So we knew that in Cascais it would be offshore at least. So we drove back down again. Everybody, we were like 20 cars, jet skis, photographers, and we got there. It was like 3 o'clock in the afternoon. It was winter time. There was like 3 more hours maybe of light. We see this massive set in near Coconuts, that disco, that Farol Hotel, Design
Yeah. Yeah.
Hotel. And we see these massive sets, big lines, just huge lines. We were like, oh my God, and perfect. But a long wave, and not like a short ride. It was like a proper train, like.
Yeah.
And we were like, okay, let's do this. Everybody start hurrying, and we managed to get in the water like 1 hour before the sunset. And the waves were big and long and super fun. Scary because it was our first time there. There was rocks, there was the marina, the wall.
Yeah.
The wave was kind of like unwritten yet, so we didn't really know where was I would say the takeoff spot, because we were towing in, but we didn't really know the lines we had to do. So, but yeah, I remember there was an amazing session. We had fun surfing. I don't know, 15 to 20 foot waves, but just the long lines. You had to speed up, do eye lines. I almost did like a little barrel on one. It was, I think it was the beginning of the towing world in Portugal.
Yeah, that whole movement, right? It's sort of just starting, and yeah, it's amazing.
Yeah.
And then going back to competing and like sort of doing those years, like you had a couple of injuries, and was that when you thought, okay, like now
Well, yeah.
maybe you would kind of
We
you'd retire from tour, or
I was again. I felt I was late blooming again. I think I qualified when I was 27, and I think when I was 30, 31 was my best moment of my career. Um, I was getting results more easily.
Mhm.
I was more comfortable on the tour. Just comfortable with the waves, comfortable with my equipment and stuff. And I think 2013, I started the year with two 17s in Australia, but I was feeling really strong, really good. And then I came home, I was surfing a beach wake. It was kind of pumping, probably some of the best waves I got on the beach wake in Portugal, in Santa Cruz. And I had this sort of like a point break barrel. It was just super hollow. Just myself and two friends in the water,
Mhm.
and I had like a 2 hour session just getting barrel off my head, and I kept going, kept going. I was super tired, and then of course I overconfident, and at the end, after 2 hours already in the water, I went for like super late drop. I was trying to stand up in the barrel straight, and the inside rail kind of didn't catch. So I went just the leap landed on my knee and just tore my leg uh, apart, and my knee apart. And that year was super painful because
Oh.
I thought it was only a grade two. Didn't need surgery back then, but it was somehow, I think sometimes grade twos are even worse because you have to do all the whole rehab process. You have to wait until it's kind of like until it kind of heals, but then you lose muscle. And so it took me almost all year, the rest of the year.
Mhm.
I kind of didn't compete more, but I was feeling super strong that year. I was 33, but feeling like my best form ever. And eventually I got a wild card for next year, injury wild card, 2014, which was my last year. That that injury kind of came back again in the beginning of 2014 in Australia. I did another grade 1 tear in my knee in between events in Australia. You know, I was kind of like feeling that it was going to start happening more and more, and just took a little bit of confidence out of me. And also the year I found out I was going to be a dad for the first time, and so after 7 years straight on tour on the CT, I kind of, you know, made my head that it was time to give my jerseys away and start thinking about projects in Portugal and become a dad, which was something that I really always strive through. So, yeah.
And was that when you did the documentary as well? That was the same year that it came out, when Sucker came out.
No, well, the documentary was my first project after I retired, and so I started filming it in 2015. I did some QSs, mostly just to film. Actually, it was filming. I was traveling with Federico and Vasco, and they're sort of like the next two guys that I kind of handed the torch to. So I was traveling with them a bit, and I chose to film all year long for the documentary, and we released the documentary end of 2016.
Nice.
It was a long process.
Yeah, and how was that? Was that sort of kind of diving into your past and everything?
Yeah, I think it's a very honest, you know, it's a very honest documentary. I didn't want to do galvanization of my persona, you know, in my movie. So I chose very well the director. I chose the guy that I trust, that he could be honest, you know, telling the story. He was not going to do that to please me. He was really going to try to tell the story how it was. Julie Wadler, a Brazilian writer, ex-pro surfer, writes columns all his life for Fluir, Hardcore, and has podcasts nowadays. I knew him way before, and I always loved his way of looking at things, you know, at the direction he was reading surfers and stuff like that. So mostly he's a very, very honest guy, not scared of saying bad shit about surfers. So I was like, no, I love Julio, and I think Julio is the right guy. So I chose Julio, and it was for me, it's a very proud project. I'm very proud that we were able to build that documentary, and it's for me, it's a big mark in my career.
Nice. And how's it been passing on the torch to Federico and Vasco, and then kind of helping them like along their journey, right?
No, it was very organically as well. You know, the kids were coming with me on trips a lot of times, and you know, I was passing all my knowledge pretty much to them, just for them to be able to surf with a tour guy at home, you know, kind of stuff that I'd never had during my early years. But that was sort of like very motivational moments for them, and and it was very organically. You know, Federico was more like was more of a good student kind of guy, and Vasco was quite a little bit different on his approach. But Federico, you know, he started working with my psychologist, and I think he was like a grade A student, you know, and he mostly, of course, his surfing was the main thing, but he became very, very strong in his head. You know, his dad is a very strong past rugby player, very, very determined, very hardworking guys, and Federico got that from his dad, plus all the knowledge from the psychologist. So he became a fierceful competitor, and and yeah, and one a guy you won't see falling many times, which is something a lot of guys do on tour, even the pro surfers, even the best guys. So I think he just has the smartest approach on on um, on his career, and he knows exactly what to do to please judges and what are his weapons to battle with the best. And he does his best, and he's most of the time at his best game. So which is very hard for everybody. Well, Vasco is more like a distracted guy, not so focused, not so well. He quit school, like that means something. Well, Federico also finished high school, very structured. Vasco quit, became like this beach rat, super talented, most talented surfer ever in Portugal for me, but just not mentally not as strong as Federico. And in a sport like this, where your mental part is probably more than half that you need to half of your power, it it doesn't help if you're not strong mentally.
And what do you like where do you see it going now? What are you working on? Is there any sort of like the next kind of generation after these guys that you're sort of supporting, or?
Yeah, I've been well, in 2017 I created React Sports Management, which is my own agency, and I started working with Vasco, with Teresa Bonvalo, helping out kids, taking care of their contracts, and sort of like mentor young athletes to succeed. And last year I was able to create a project called EDP Surf for Tomorrow, which is an elite surf training program created for five European kids, which actually it's only with Portuguese and Spanish kids, but basically they got my coach and myself involved in this surf training program, annually program, which takes them to trips all over the world, intensive training journeys with ourselves, and mostly just to try to help more Europeans to qualify. It's a very, very complete program, and yeah, I help kids. I do events as well, surf oriented, and it's my life nowadays.
Nice. And any kind of like big wave spots, or kind of getting back to places either locally or overseas? Has you got sort of any kind of surfing things that you think, okay, like I still want to kind of tick this off? Or
at the moment I'm going through a very, very hard moment, family wise. My kids, they're the best thing in my life, but they sleep very poorly at night, so you can see my eyes. I'm not looking very, very nice. So I'm just going through this phase now, but I think I still have a few trips that I wanna endure. I wanna go, and I wanna go to spots that I've always dreamed about. I still have a few spots on my list that I need to get to know. I'm very, very driven to surf perfect waves still. And yeah, mostly that's my life nowadays, and just be able to raise my kids comfortably, and to spend time with them, because I spent almost 16, 17 years away from home, and nowadays we were able to to build a very comfortable life, and try to enjoy it the most I can.
Nice. Cool, man. And what's the best way if people want to follow what you're up to? How can they reach out?
The best way, I'm not a very for it's sort of like confusing, but in my work, I kind of teach kids to communicate and and help them to build careers with brands and stuff. But myself, I'm not a very communicative person. I of course I communicate through my mostly through my friends and to people that know me inside in my inner circle, but I do communicate via Instagram, Twitter a little bit, Facebook. I used to communicate way more. Nowadays I'm not even using it, but Instagram, yeah, I do stuff. I do show a little bit of my life, but not as much as people would like to know, maybe, because I'm just not that type of person. I was always a little bit of inner inner person. I wasn't very kind of guy that wants to tell
Post
about his
everything,
life.
right? And yeah.
Exactly. I'm sort of like a reserved person, but of course I like to tell my fans what's going on in my life, but don't expect me to do sort of like a day by day journal of my life. No,
Yeah.
I won't do that. But yeah, Instagram for sure. And then just maybe follow EDP Surf for Tomorrow. We do this webisode series, which is very, very well done. I would probably say the best I've ever seen in Europe. I can be a little bit tendency not so how do you say this, because I'm involved with the project, but please go watch EDP for Tomorrow. Watch
Yeah.
1 or 2 episodes and you'll get you'll get consumed, and you'll get you say this, involved with it. I think
Yeah.
it's a very nice way of telling stories, life stories, and we're following the life of the journey of these 5 kids throughout
And
the
they're ripping as
goods
well.
and
I've
and the,
seen
and,
I've seen
and the
some of it.
bads. They rip all of them. We have a few changes for this year, the second year, a few changes in the team, but we're gonna start doing it again, and it's something that for me I feel very proud of, because to have to be able to create this program and to have an electricity company spending so much money with surfing, for me, and I feel sort of like responsible for it. I feel very proud.
Yeah, that's cool. Nice. Well, Tiago, thanks so much for your time, man. It
My
was
pleasure.
awesome to hear the stories and the wild journey it's been over the years competing, and then everything that you're doing at the moment. It's really cool to see the support that you're giving to the kids as well, and then look forward to seeing them on tour in a couple of years.
Hopefully, that's what we're working for. Let's see. You never know,
Nice.
man. These days, there's all these paths you can follow, but
Yeah.
at the same time, there's more noise and more pollution in the middle. So it's always a big surprise.
Cool. Nice, man.
Okay. Thank you very much.